Welcome to another episode of Pour and Tell. This is Pour and Tell, episode 18. I'm your host, John, the cigar surgeon, here as always with my co-host, Jiunn Liu. Jiunn, what's going on, buddy?
Oh, well, we were just talking about, what everyone's talking about lately, COVID-19, of course. So, a little fired up of the stupidity of these motherfuckers that think that they're so self-absorbed and they need to stock up on 70 pounds of beef for a week.
Thank God they're not stocking up on whiskey or beer in the same quantities that they're stocking up on toilet paper. There'd be a real fight at the liquor store.
Oh, by the way, for those of you that truly think drinking whiskey that's over whatever that proof is to kill germs is going to help you, you're a fucking idiot. Because I've met some people where they're like, no, man, like, I purposely bought all this barrel proof stuff. And I was like, hey, shit. I was like, shithead. It's not the way it works, okay?
To say nothing of the fact that, like, drinking an abnormal amount of barrel proof spirit is going to actually raise your risk factors for throat and esophageal cancer, obviously liver cancer. So, you want to imbibe in moderate amounts. It's not going like I know I like to throw out jokes about drinking Isla whiskey when you're feeling sick. It's a joke. It's not serious. Don't be drinking whiskey as a medicinal. Like it's a joke. Don't do that. Like I realize it's tough in this environment now.
Some people, I mean, there's so much information out there. Anybody with a fucking phone and internet connection can post whatever the fuck they want, right? So it's a little scary. Tread with wisdom.
Be a little cynical about the information you're getting out there. Check other sources. I have a substantial number of pours to go through. So did you want to go first, or do you want me to go first, or what's your thoughts on that?
I'll go real quick.
All right.
I have way less than you do, and I'll probably go a lot faster than
I'm
you.
not an alcoholic because I don't admit I have a problem.
It's not, given our 2-week interval of doing these shows, having these pours is not that much.
It's really not. And I mean, most of these pours for me are they're not even a full ounce pour. Like most of these pours are like half an ounce because that's kind of what I feel like.
Yeah, you're not bottle killing all of this stuff.
No.
which should be really fucked up.
Yeah.
Anyways, all right. So I have 3 different whiskeys to talk about, and within this last couple of weeks, within the stuff that I tasted, what really stood out, it's a mix of surprises, cheap stuff, and just shit. This is really good, but I can't really find it anymore. So, in lieu of kind of celebrating St. Patty's Day, got to give a shout out to Irish whiskey, right? So this, if you guys can see, is the Redbreast 12-year-old. But this is not just any Redbreast that you take shots with like Seth Guys. This is actually the Cask Strength version. So this is their...
Fancy.
Yeah, the barrel proof version. This thing is 54.6%. This is batch number B119. And it's, of course, batch specific because this is no longer their regular 12-year in which they proof it down. It's contingent on batch within what the actual alcohol content and proof is. Proof being 109.2 proof. I love this. This is about around. I bought this for I think around like $65, like $60 to $65 at Total Wine, big box store here. And
I think that's a pretty reasonable price.
Yeah, it's people could kind of shit on like, oh, hey, it's 12-year Irish, it's 12-year non-bourbon, non-American whiskey. Like, how could it be? This is really good. The thing about this is, you get typically all the great things about Irish whiskey. It's typically very approachable Irish whiskey, right? You get a lot of soft white notes, get a lot of vanilla out of there. You get a lot of these like jam kind of fruit notes to it, like a biscuity, bready note to it. So it's all there, but it just kind of takes it from regular 12-year Redbreast to like kind of elevates it, giving more body, certainly a lot more depth and boldness and flavor, but also still incredibly approachable.
Yeah, I think 54% that's a reasonable area. Like anything, I think from 49 to 57-ish is 56-ish is quite approachable from a cask. Like I think once you get over that 56 level, that gets into big boy territory. And yeah, I
Yeah.
think you said 54.5.
Yeah, 54, yeah, 54.6, 54.5, something, whatever.
That's yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's that's where I'd like my cask strength to be. I think most of the
Yeah.
time.
Um, Speaking of Redbreast, I know that Redbreast or Middleton rather, they released in limited markets recently, California being one of them, Redbreast 27-year-old version.
Ooh, I bet that's a few
Uh,
ducats.
yeah, man, I was kicking myself, dude. So I'm a part of these like various like whiskey groups and stuff that's out there in social media, and one of the more local mom and pop stores it hit, and MSRP is $500 a bottle for this. Costco apparently got it earlier this week on like Tuesday, and one of the guys tipped me on it for $380. So way cheaper, right? Good old Costco pricing. So no joke, my buddy saw it at Costco and he texted me. This was probably at like 6 o'clock when he texted me PM. And then I got it at like maybe like 6:10, 6:15. So I fucking booked it to Costco. And Costco's only 15 minutes away from me, right? So basically within the 30-minute interval, I go there, fucking gone.
Wow.
So and then
Well,
later on
yeah.
what I realized was when I was checking through like my different feeds for social media, that a lot of people posted it in the local feeds here
Uh,
that Costco got it, the one near me got it. And
yeah.
I was like, you motherfuckers.
Totally understandable though. Like that's a stupid good price, even at $500. So people are maybe not aware. Old Irish whiskey tends to be considerably more expensive than Scotch whiskey. So you take a Scotch whiskey at 27 years, that's $500 is not an unreasonable amount for a Scotch whiskey at 27 years. So I would have expected a Irish whiskey over 25 years to be in the $800, $700-800 range because old Irish whiskey is just really expensive and there's just not a lot of it.
Yeah, no, so I don't know, and I can't get myself to spend the $500 MSRP, but I'm trying to think. My mindset sometimes goes, "All right, June, this is not nationally distributed. It's only to certain markets, and you just are lucky enough to be in one of the few markets, being in California, that's distributed. So maybe you should just cough up the MSRP and buy one, and stop pouting about not being able to get it from Costco." I
Stupid,
don't know.
delicious, rare Irish whiskey.
Uh, Yeah, it's rare is definitely the word, and it's so delicious. I love like it's interesting. It's like cigars, right? Like at some point, people like find they keep smoking Connecticut shades, and then they're like, oh my God, there's Connecticut broadleaf, there's Pennsylvania broadleaf. Like, what is this bonus and flavors, right? This is amazing. And then you kind of smoke and smoke more, or you drink more and more barrel proof, and then you kind of go, wait, I miss, and then you randomly pick up a bottle of Irish whiskey. You randomly pick up another like Connecticut shade cigar that you haven't had in a while, and you go, "Wow, there's a lot of nuances and great flavors out of this thing. That's not beat me over the head with it, right?" And that's kind of how I'm kind of being. That's how I think about Irish whiskey in general, right? Because whenever I want to sit with it and just enjoy it and not let any of that like alcohol content swayed my palate and nosing and all that. Irish whiskey, I don't see where else you could go aside from Irish whiskey for the money and the taste.
It's good stuff.
So, anyways, moving on. Um, this next one is a heater. So this is a at a Buffalo Trace distillery, out of Kentucky, Stagg Junior. So Stagg Junior is released essentially on a seasonal basis, so like four times a year ish. And this particular one is a big bourbon, 66.15% alcohol,
Woo!
132.3 proof.
Wow.
This is believed to be aged somewhere. They don't disclose this, but it's believed that it's aged somewhere between like 6, 7, 8 year ish. Um, so what's so incredibly unique about this is when you nose it, when you drink it, you really don't get that alcohol content. It's shocking that you don't get it. There's a ton of like bright cherry notes, a lot of vanilla, caramel, kind of brown sugar thing going on. Um, you don't really understand the alcohol until you probably drink like ounce and a half or so. As compared to like ounce and a half of Redbreast, you put it down, right? And you're like, oh, good. Let's have something else. Ounce and a half or so of this. Yeah, you feel it. So
66 is no joke.
no, it's not. You definitely, I definitely feel it in my noggin after drinking a couple ounces of it, or even not even a couple ounces, maybe like ounce and a half. So, but maybe I'm just a lightweight.
No, I mean the math of that is an ounce and a half of that would be 3.25, just over 3.25 ounces of non-cask strength bourbon.
Yeah.
So that's 3 grams. That's a lot of bourbon.
Yeah, for sure. So this is quote unquote determined as batch 12, i.e. released summer of 2019. I like that bottle so much that I actually found a local guy here and I traded him a bottle of it to get another bottle of it, and I gave him like another bottle of bourbon. So
nice.
Last but not least,
oh,
so
there it is.
When you guys go to Costco and you see these sometimes you see these little Scotch whiskeys that come around, right? You're like, shit, man, that's a lot of age stated, and it's only like $80. I wonder if it's good. Well, I wonder the same thing. So I just got this when I had to deal with that shitty Costco crowd this past Wednesday. So this is Kirkland Signatures, in which Alexander Murray did the pick for, which is I think they basically exclusively pick for Costco Kirkland. But anyway, I don't know if it's exclusive or not, but they certainly pick a lot of the scotches that I've seen. This is 22-year-old Space Ice single malt scotch, sherry cask finished. They don't really disclose, how long. Well, they say a minimum of 6 months in Oloroso sherry cask. There's not much information on it other than that, honestly. So, and then it's $80, like I said. What drew me to it is, when I go to Costco, after I hit up the vegetables and meat section, it naturally spins me around to the alcohol section. So I always have to stop by and take a quick look. And I first saw the bottle and I saw this like deep, like mahogany whiskey, right? And I was like, and I didn't even know it was Kirkland Signature. I was like, oh shit, like that's a really nice color on that whiskey. So I bought it. I drank a couple ounces of it earlier this week. I would say worth the money, absolutely. But for a 22-year-old that's also finishing Oloroso Sherry, I kind of feel like it should have been giving me more depth. The finish is a little short. The body I felt like could have used some help as well. It's a little thin as well. But with all that said, I couldn't be any happier to purchase this for $80 a bottle.
What do you think? It was several fill sherry butt, maybe?
Oh, it's got to be. I mean, you don't get the near intensity of first fill Oloroso Sherry.
Yeah, and 6 months is not a long time. I mean, we've talked about on the show. I've had some entirely aged sherry whiskeys, and obviously the sherry influence becomes monster at that point. But 6 months is not a lot of time. Just enough to give it a little hint, little treat.
It's like, oh, it's there. I enjoy it. I taste it, but it's like, wait, where's the finish? Yeah. Right? Where is that long lingering, like fruit that I know so much of?
Big jammy punch.
Exactly. So because that's missing, then it's kind of a downer. But honestly, like in my opinion, what stands out from often a good whiskey to a great whiskey is that long lingering finish. And very few whiskeys I've had had that just ongoing like long lingering finish. It's not always there. Most of the time it's not.
Well, I have a few fours to go through this week, so I'll just jump right in. Okay. I have a good friend. He knows who he is. He watches the show. Thanks for tuning in. And he oftentimes will pick up interesting things when we go over and do cigar herfs. So one of the interesting bottles he had was a Pedro Ximénez sherry, which I don't think I've actually had Pedro Ximénez sherry by itself, mostly because I don't go out and buy it. But I've also never been to a tasting that has had various types of sherry. So it was an interesting experience. This is the Bodega Toro Albala. It's a 1987 PX, so Pedro Ximénez sherry, 17% ABV. I believe I didn't put the bottle age on there. I think it was I should have looked it up. It was either 18 years or 25 years. I can't remember now. I thought I had the age in there. I must have deleted it. But at any rate, it was a pretty old Pedro Ximénez sherry. I think the retail on that is around $65 Canadian. Obviously, not a lot of people are drinking sherry anymore. It's not a popular spirit, but the whiskey industry depends on those barrels. It's better for the sherry to have been in that barrel and then they use the barrel rather than them just fill it up and throw the sherry out because you don't get the same influence in the wood. All of that to say, wow, what an experience. I will definitely be looking at the sherry in the liquor stores that I go to in the future, especially for some of the older sherry. The value of the money versus the flavor performance that you're getting out of this was outrageously tasty, paired really well with cigars. Talking about that jamminess.
This is just like just regular, just PX sherry?
Yeah.
Oh.
Just regular PX sherry.
That's so interesting. Why did I never think of ever buying bottle of sherry or two to just see what it's like as the actual pure spirit itself? I don't know.
It's huge. I mean, it poured like 1 part motor oil, 1 part molasses. Like it's thicker than port. It was just huge, jammy, all the goodness that you think of Pedro Ximénez. I mean, maybe too much, but I enjoyed it I was pairing with Habanos cigars, Cuban cigars, paired brilliantly. The interesting thing about it is you really can't have 2 drams of it. It's just so palate coating and so huge. 1 dram was really good. And the funny part is we were taking pictures of, because we poured it in a Glencairn, which is commonly used for whiskey. And it was like maple syrup. Like the entire inside of the glass was just coated. It was so thick. Good experience for $65. Cool. Heck of a steal, I would say.
Yeah, this is like a dumb moment. I'm like, man, I can't believe I've never done that. Right?
Yeah. So I'll be on the lookout in the future for Pedro Ximénez and obviously Oloroso. For the money, it's a heck of an experience. Moving right along, same lovely friend poured the Edradour Vintage 2005. It is a first fill Oloroso sherry, 61.4%. It's a Whiskey Exchange handpick. So the Whiskey Exchange specifically picked this barrel. Cask number 131, 567 bottles. It's like a lot of the Edradour first fill Oloroso sherry that I've had that he's poured for me. It's like a deep blood red. And so again, talking about that Oloroso sherry experience, this definitely gives you that nice jammy, satisfying sherry experience. The finish isn't quite as huge as some of the other older Edradours I've had, but it was pretty satisfying. And again, I think it's a natural fit. It's a natural pairing with Cuban cigars for me, just because the tobacco flavors tend to marry really well with the Oloroso sherry. Pretty good experience. I was going through some of my old stock and I forgot, because I was a member of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society for quite some time, and I forgot that they give you a starter pack. And in that starter pack, they have these 100 ml bottles, these little tiny bottles of examples to kind of get you started. And I completely forgot I had these things. So I have 3 of them, and I've been kind of working my way through these over the last couple of weeks. So the first one was a 10.117. And for those who aren't aware, because it's a private bottling, you can't put the name of the distillery on the bottle. For Scotch industry, you can only put the name of the distillery on the bottle if it's bottled at the distillery. So they use a code. The first 2 numbers, or first number, denotes the distillery. So in this case, 10 is Bunnahabhain. The second number, in this case 117, is the number of casks that they've bottled over the years. So this is the 117th cask that they've bottled. It's 61.2% ABV, so it's a bit of a monster, and all the Scotch Malt Whisky Society stuff is at cask strength, so it's not watered down. It is a refill ex-bourbon barrel, got 150 bottles out of it. It's 9 years old, so quite young, but it is delicious. It is, I would say, Ardbeg-like, kind of, if you could kind of combine 1 part Ardbeg with maybe 1 part Cragganmore, 1 part KLA, 1 part Lagavulin. it's just got that lovely, salty, briny, coastal character to it. And then that bourbon character comes out from underneath it. So you get that sort of stone fruit flavor, apricots, pears, that kind of thing. Really, really nice dram for 9 years. And I think illustrates, for me, how good some of the younger cask strength whiskey that Malt Society has can be. Then moved up to a brand that doesn't really resonate with me in their normal stuff. This is a 3.213. So 3 is Bamor, 213, so 213th bottling. They've done a lot of Bamor over the years. This is an 18-year-old Bamor, 56 point ABV. Pretty satisfying. I would say it has a lot of the standard Bamor character, but the cask strength is what takes it to the next level. I think the level of complexity and depth of flavors there is a lot more. I know there's a lot of Bamor heads out there. People really, really connect with that brand. It's not really a brand for me. So it really takes a spectacular Bamor for me to connect with it. It's not really my thing, but this, pretty good. 18-year-old.
Yeah, Bowmore seems like one of those like distillery brands where there's always a healthy stock readily available on the shelf of like older age stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
like Glenfarclas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. For now, anyways. We'll see what the future holds.
True.
Last whiskey this week, the last Scotch whiskey, I should say, is a 9.77. This is a Gran, and this is a 25-year-old, 56.8%. So still a lot of ABV after 25 years. It was bottled in 2014. Pretty spectacular. There's no question in my mind. This is one of the better whiskeys I've had. It's not like a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot. This is not like some of the 25-year-olds or older whiskeys I've had where the flavor profile might have been a bit thin or a little wood forward. It's just brilliant. It's really, really nice. It's got a lot of character to it. It's tasty. I would say in contrast to the Bamor 18, where you do get a lot of that oaky character, none of that here. This is just kind of a brilliant old whiskey. I can't even describe it. Sadly, it is all gone, but tasty 100 mils, which I don't know what the value of that would be, but I mean, I have to assume that would be in the $100 range, maybe $80, $90 range for the 100 mil, given that I think a 700 mil, 750 mil bottle at 25 years is probably in the 360, 380 mark for cask strength, maybe. So pretty yummy. Now I've been on a bit of a kick, trying to bring my weight down a little bit. Got a little chunky over the Christmas season, so I've been managing my calorie intake. Unfortunately, that means I can do a dram of whiskey because it's not that many calories. Beer's been a little tougher to come by because a beer essentially amounts to 5 drams of whiskey or 4 drams of whiskey. So it's been tough for me to drink some beer lately. I did have a delicious beer a couple weeks ago. I had just decided that's every once in a while I just need a beer. I wanted a beer. It's wintertime still here. And this is from Village Brewery. This is the Village Monk Chai Winter Porter. So the name kind of tells you right off the hop what you're going to get. 6.2% ABV, 18 IBUs, so not really that bitter, but they use quite a number of interesting hops in this. They use a high alpha Galena hop for the bitters, and then they use an imported British Fuggles as the aroma hop. So it kind of adds some depth to it. I think, if I'm not mistaken, those are commonly used in English style bitter beer, at least the Fuggles. I know that I've run into Fuggles quite a bit, but like I said, 18 IBUs is really not bitter forward. It's just really to give it more depth of character. And then for the malt, they use a combination of premium Alberta pale malt and then imported caramel, and then they roast chocolate malts in there as well. So you get a lot of that chocolate character, and I think for me, I don't know what your feelings are on this, but I find a lot of times porters are just a little too thin for me. That makes sense?
It's I think this might be a regional thing, John, but I actually think the opposite, because most porters that I come across here are vastly like imperial porters. And oftentimes they may be aged in various other barrels, so they're typically a lot more boozier and like viscous than what most traditional porter styles is intended to be.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's definitely opposite, because
No.
I would say most of the porters that styles that we get in Canada, at least that I've purchased, and I certainly purchased more beer than I should. It's more of the traditional style porter, which is that thinner, less viscous, less heavy IBU or less heavy ABV, I should say, and the as a result, the profile is more sessionable. It's not that imperial style, and that's okay. I just find the overall profile, flavor profile, to be too thin most of the time. Now, all of that to sort of round up with the Village Monk Chai Winter Porter to say that's not the case here. The chai flavor, the chocolate flavors, all of that combines to give a really satisfying, like it's not going to break the bank in terms of flavor complexity against some world-class brands, but I would say for a regular production, very, very satisfying. Checked all the boxes for me, kind of exactly what I wanted.
Nice. Man, now you're making me want to drink beer. I'm sure you do too. I have all these big beers at home.
Yeah.
Like I open up my pantry, which is like my main pantry to go do for, drinking my dreams of scotch and whiskey in general. And I also see on the bottom shelf just fucking stacks of beer. Like,
Bombers, right?
yeah, just
Yeah.
bombers and like I'm looking at barrel aged 1050 that I bought 2 years ago, just looking straight at me, and I'm just kind of like, I was like, man, I can't. I know once I drink this, I'm gonna burp and be bloated and
Yeah.
feel like a piece of shit for the rest of my day. So
No, I like I said, I wasn't kidding when I said I buy more beer than I should. I'm in the same boat. I have too much beer. I don't drink as much as I've actually had to stop buying because I've stockpiled so many bombers, and I am in the same boat. I just find it really, really tough calorically wise, and obviously for the day. I just can't sit down and polish off a bomber by myself. So it's just I got to stop buying for a little while until I can get caught up
yeah.
on my inventory.
Oh, us us enthusiasts, stupid
Stupid
enthusiasts.
enthusiast. So last but not least, because you were kind of giving me the gears earlier in the week, I wanted to go back to some of the delicious bourbon stock that I'm sitting on, and I am sitting on a lot of bourbon stock because over the years, Canada, for whatever reason, has received been on the receiving end of some pretty nice bourbon at some pretty reasonable prices, and because
Hmm.
people aren't as crazy up here on some of these rare bourbons, I'm sitting on a multitude of I don't know if you call them mainstay, but like mainstay brand, more exclusive or limited releases. So one of the ones that tends to be my favorite, we cracked last week, was the Elijah Craig small batch. So I like Elijah Craig. I like the Elijah Craig 12 year. I like the Elijah Craig 9 year. Small batch for me kind of highlights what I like in small batch whiskey. It's only 47% ABV, so it's not heavy proof, 94 proof. They of course they say on the bottle first char oak barrels, which I was like, aren't they all first char oak barrels? Like what,
Yeah,
that's
for bourbon,
yeah.
yeah.
But it's got that really nice balance between that sort of corn spice that you get out of bourbon and the corn sweetness. So neither one of them really dominate the palate. And there's this lovely caramel that I love out of bourbon that brings it all together. It just makes for one of those drams where you come home and you're like, I really want a bourbon tonight, and you pour it and you're like, oh yeah, man, this reminds me of what I love, everything that I love about bourbon. And I don't know what I paid for it, but I think it was only
Uh,
44 or $48 Canadian at the
yeah,
time.
if
So
that.
yeah.
It's interesting that so the backstory is I think I was like messaging John earlier this week or last week, and I was like, "You don't drink much American whiskey, do you?" And then he's just kind of like, "Oh no," and then he listed a bunch of stuff, and I was like, "Okay, you drink a lot."
Well, I certainly buy a lot. I don't know. Certainly, like you said, part of the problem is I'm not drinking enough of my inventory. I have these, and I need to go back and revisit some of these bottles over the next coming weeks. But I've got all these really nice, like I said, rare cask strength, older. Like I've got a 12-year Knob Creek, and I remember when they switched from the 12-year Knob Creek to the 9-year Knob Creek, and everyone was like, "This is insane. Bourbon world is collapsing upon itself. It was crazy." And I'm like, well, I have the 12 years, so I guess I'm
Yeah,
happy.
the the demand, especially in America, for bourbon has just been it's stupid.
Yeah.
Is what I realize is people. I cannot believe people freak out this much, and um honestly, guys, like I know a lot of these bourbon guys that are like hardcore bourbon. They're like, I can't get into Scotch because I don't like that smoky flavor. I was like, dude, not all scotches are smoky, okay? Like, I don't know where the hell you guys. I don't know what asshole gave you Lafroy 10 for your first
Who
entry
hurt
into
you?
like, yeah, for your first entry into the Scotch world. But dude, there's way more than that. And I mean, like, shoot me. I'm sure people disagree with me some, but like, there's so much more complexities and nuances in Scotch as compared to bourbon. Like, I'm sorry, it is what it is.
Yeah,
Like, but they're both
they're
good,
both
right?
good.
So,
And peated whiskey makes up only a very small percentage of the market share.
mhm.
Like it is very small. It's like saying I can't drink bourbon because it's always cask strength, and I can't stand cask strength bourbon. And it's like, what? What
Yeah.
are you talking about?
Yeah, or like you make some dumb shit story like, "Oh, I don't like corn
Yeah,
distilled
right.
spirits." I was like, what does that even
What does
mean?
that even mean? I don't like rice. I just can't eat. I
Yeah.
can't do
I
rice.
just no, she's like, I don't like these little white little slivets."
Scares me. It's terrifying. So that's all we have this week in pours, but in libation news, we have quite a number of libation news. So I'll just I'll take the first one. I don't know if you want to take the third and fourth one, maybe, but I'll take the first two here. First one comes to us from, believe it or not, CNN. Kind of a funny little travel tale. I guess there was a malfunction in a winery there, and this town, this Italian town, Castellovretto, the the wine seeped into their water table, and as a result, they had red wine coming out of all their bathroom taps and shower heads. It was 1,000 liters of ready to be bottled wine
Whoa.
that leaked into the water pipe. So, I mean, it's funny, but it's also kind of tragic because that's a lot of wine. It's a lot of probably really good wine. Obviously, kind of messed up their water system for a little while, but not once. Maybe Italians are kind of used to hijinks like that. But man, you open your tap and a bunch of wine comes in. Not really what you're expecting. Is it the end times? What's going on here?
Oh, man.
So that was kind of a funny tale. Going from a funny tale to a not funny tale, this comes from us from whiskycast.com. Sadly, some industry veterans here in Canada, and I know them, I've met them on more than a few occasions. It sounds like they were doing some no-nos down in Idaho. They apparently were buying whiskey, having the whiskey shipped to them in Idaho, rebottling it, and then selling it in Canada, at least allegedly. That is kind of a huge no-no, both in Idaho, certainly in Canada, certainly cross-border. As the court record, the court indictment says, they were shipping from, I guess the records go back to November, and they said they were telling the private postal franchise handling the shipments that the package contained blown glass from Scotland instead of whiskey. So, yeah, bad. I won't dwell on this too, but that's unfortunate because from what the article said, it is a pretty serious crime in Idaho, and I think they were saying they could potentially face up to 20 or 25 years in prison. So pretty
Wait, they're
serious.
buying they went to buy the actual packaged whiskey in the bottle.
Yeah, so what they were
And
doing is they were doing whiskey advent calendars. So they were buying the bottles, shipping them to Idaho, presumably to
uh
avoid any sort of duties and whatever, and then repackaging it into. And again, this is all alleged. So like these are all allegations that are unproven in court, but rebottling them in whiskey advent calendars, bring them up to Canada, and then selling them. And they've been in the industry for a long time. Like I want to say 17, 18 years. So really unfortunate news. You don't hear this happen very often because I think anyone who's in the industry is relatively aware of the potential ramifications, legal ramifications of something like this, you getting caught. It's not quite the same as having a box of Cuban cigars shipped to you. You're shipping 154 boxes of whiskey. That can be some serious jail time if those
well,
allegations are
yeah,
proven in court.
I mean, these, they know that they were blatantly breaking the law. All right, so
Allegedly.
yeah, allegedly. Sorry, allegedly.
Anyways, so moving right along, I sent you an article earlier in the week, kind of an interesting one. Do you want to talk about that from foodandwine.com.
You go through them. I'll comment on them.
Okay, so interestingly enough, and I didn't really see this coming, but Beer Advocate, of course, has a website. They've been around for quite some time. They actually purchased the. I've got this backwards now. Beer Advocate has been purchased by Untappd's own ownership group. So I found that kind of surprising because I didn't think that and I obviously had no sense of it, but I did not think that Untappd was that big. Certainly not big enough to make a purchase of Beer Advocate. I would have assumed it was the reverse, that Beer Advocate would have purchased out Untappd. So that's kind of an interesting move.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's almost like they're trying to like curb the corner on the review slash media rating side of the beer world,
Right?
right? Because like Beer Advocate, I still go to Beer Advocate quite a bit
Yeah.
to look at, especially like the regional forums that they have broken out by, in terms of like news and releases and all that good stuff. What people are drinking like locally and nationally. And then Untappd, of course, I mean, it is the app that beer lovers use to log their inventory of beer and do like a quick style of kind of how they felt about it and the rating of it. So very interesting move.
And I would also say
Yeah.
one of the things that Beer Advocate's really good for is if I can't find the specs on a beer, because unfortunately
Mm,
sometimes guys are, beer heads are really focused on just brewing their beer. They're not necessarily focused on having a good website experience. So Beer Advocate is oftentimes my reference point if I need to find the ABV, if I need to find out the IBUs, other specs on the beer. They're pretty good about that, and so it's often used as a reference point for me.
mhm,
Yeah, it's interesting moves.
absolutely.
This one's kind of interesting. Jim Beam has got themselves in some hot water here. This comes by way of a website called WFPL.org. And I guess Jim Beam had been lobbying for a natural gas. They wanted to increase their capacity. Of course, when you do distillation, modern distillation, you typically would use natural gas because that's the way you heat your stills. That's the way that it used to be done by coal, or if you're in Scotland or Ireland, you maybe used peat. Natural gas is the most efficient way to do it. But in order for them to enhance the capacity, they needed a new natural gas line. Well, they didn't really want to pay for it because it was in the several $100,000 range, and this is for their Bullitt Company division. So I guess they got into some hot water because they were maneuvering to say, no, this is a public line. This is used for the public. Except, of course, none of the public were using a line. It was going directly to their distillation. So I think they kind of got their hands slapped a little bit in trying to maneuver around the quote-unquote public works use of this line. I mean, hard to fault them for trying. I mean, it's a $350,000 US touch. That's not inexpensive.
Yeah. Way to go, Beam Suntory.
Kind of not the. I don't know how widespread this article was, but I saw it on Reddit, and then I pulled up the one of the original sources of this, and had a few chuckles. Hopefully there's no fines or anything that comes with that, and hopefully
Oh,
they get
man.
their natural gas line in soon and expand process. Last but not least, this week this comes via the whiskeywash.com. And one of the things we don't talk a lot about on the show, which I think is one of the most, it's like 90% of the whiskey styles out there, is blended Scotch whiskey. So Chivas, I think everyone's heard of Chivas Regal. Chivas has debuted a new line of blended Scotch. It's 13-year age statement, and they're kind of focusing on the casks. So each of these lines is supposed to highlight a particular cask's flavor profile, which I think is kind of an interesting experience. So there's 4 releases. There's a Chivas Extra 13 Oloroso Sherry. Obviously, I'd be looking forward to that. There's a Chivas Extra 13-year-old rum cask. Chivas Extra 13-year-old American rye cask, which is kind of interesting. You don't see a lot of Scotch whiskey aged in rye cask. In fact, that might be a very, very small segment. And then last but not least, Chivas Extra 13 tequila cask. So
Those are these are great moves. So I mean, I could talk about my personal opinion on Chivas and just current uh whiskey enthusiasts talking about Chivas, or the lack thereof talking about Chivas. Because I remember back in the day when I mean, this is like my earlier younger boozing days than anything, you drink your Chivas 12, right? And you just kind of go, oh, this is disgusting. Why am I drinking this? But let's just drink it to get hammered. And then you're like, wait a minute. And then you get a little older. You're like, okay, there's Chivas like non-12
Yeah,
out here. What is this Chivas 18 that then this little blue bottle looking cardboard box thing? And you're like, hey, this is a lot more approachable. There's like some good notes and nuances to it. And then I left Chivas world completely, and I don't know why. And then me being around like us being around like the whiskey groups out there and the social media groups, nobody talks about
nope.
Chivas. Like people talk about like monkey shoulder way more than like even
It's
Chivas.
true.
You know what I mean?
People don't talk about Johnny Walker. They don't talk about Chivas.
Yeah,
And I mean, like I said, blended Scotch whiskey is the bulk of the market. I mean, in the same way, if we were to draw an analogy to cigars, little cigars, cigarillos, little cigars are the bulk of machine-made cigars, are the bulk of the quote-unquote cigar market. Obviously, not the premium handmade market, but that is the bulk of the market, like it or not. So it's an interesting move. I'll keep my eyes out on the shelf to see what those look like in terms of price. I think if they come in at an affordable level, I think I would probably try. Probably not get the rum cask. I'm not really a huge fan of rum cask finished Scotch in general, but the tequila one sounds interesting, and I certainly Oloroso Sherry is right in my alley. So
yeah. No, I definitely want to try them. It's so interesting how people that really get into a particular hobby, let's say whiskey or cigars, that you kind of shift towards really understanding the palate and the craft of how things are made, and then you slowly drift away from all these like heavily marketed stuff. Not to say that the heavily marketed stuff is not quality, but usually you could find better quality and also better pricing when you kind of dig into it a little bit more. So,
absolutely. Yep. And I want
well,
to send a shout out to all the people that took time over the last couple of weeks to comment on our Facebook page, developingpalates.com, Developing Palates on YouTube, Developing Palates on Facebook. Appreciate all your comments. Keep them coming. Glad to know that our listeners are out there and sending us comments. If you have any comments about this show, any of the pairings, any of the pourings that we've done this week, please leave your thoughts. We'd love to hear those comments. Keep them coming. And we'll be back in 2 weeks as always. Thanks very much for tuning in.
later.